Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm here to read a comic. And today's comic is Superman, issue number 273, dated March 1974. This is a comic I do have somewhat of a personal connection with because it's one of the earliest comics I remember buying off the newsstand. And it's one that I kind of somewhat enjoyed when I was, I think, 7 at the time. And rereading it, it's not a great story. However, there were parts that I did enjoy. There was a space race between our hero and not really a villain, but a man of delusions. And that was very enjoyable. When I look at the cover, I kind of feel like DC is telling on itself. And there are a couple moments in this comic that are like this. This was around the time where Superman was still the top-selling comic, but Spider-Man was getting closer and closer, and that gap was getting smaller and smaller. And I feel like we see a bunch of these kind of young college males. They're holding up this individual with 3 eyes, an eye on his forehead as their new hero. They no longer want anything to do with Superman. They're throwing bottles at him. They're throwing tomatoes. They're throwing, tomato cans at him. And I kind of feel like DC might have been feeling this way about their fan base, as more and more of them were defecting to Marvel and viewing Spider-Man as their hero. They're kind of just, throwing away poor Superman here, who gave them decades of good, wholesome adventures. And then they're just turning to this, sad sack Spider-Man and his problems. So I think DC might have been kind of like, a little testy at this time. The letters were a little testy. However, I didn't sense this point of view in the story itself. The cover is by Nick Cardy. Nick Cardy drew a lot of great covers at this time. This is a pretty good one. So I'm going to look at the story, and the story is The Wizard with the Golden Eye. I think the movie The Man with the Golden Gun was out. So sometimes they like to kind of like play with titles like that at DC. We see that the writer is Elliot Maggin. He was a pretty good writer. They had a lot of, DC writers had a lot of bad restrictions on them in terms of formal and informal edicts from their editors. And their editors had a lot of power over them. The artist is Kurt Swan and Vince Colletta. I would say one of them is an artist, and it's not Vince. And Vince tries to rob Kurt Swan of some of his humanity in his art. Sometimes he's successful, sometimes he isn't. And Jules Schwartz is the editor. So, and we see the splash page is basically retelling what we're going to expect as this individual, this kind of gaudy, tacky, magician type individual with his magical third eye is stopping a nuclear missile or bomb from exploding over Metropolis, but at the same time there's sort of this weird kind of fallout. So every time this person uses their powers, there's sort of this strange fallout that's causing problems. So anyway, the story opens up. Clark Kent's at the newsroom. The obnoxious sports reporter Steve Lombardi, who's kind of Clark's secret foil. Lombardi tries to make a fool of Clark, but Clark's kind of able to figure this out beforehand. He ends up making Steve look like the fool. However, Steve is kind of like a sexist buffoon. He's a good-looking guy, and he was a famous quarterback. So he notices a very attractive new employee, a redhead, he says, "Listen, Clark, I'm gonna show your virgin ass how it's done. How real men get laid, and it isn't like putting bills on some dresser drawer." So Steve kind of introduces himself to this attractive young woman. She's familiar with him, so the two are kind of hitting it off, kind of like two very shallow people would. Clark's kind of bothered by this because he doesn't like seeing Steve win. Because again, he's a huge dick. Deep down inside, it's going back to that whole race with the Flash. The Flash wanted that title, fastest man on Earth. That's all he wanted. And Superman was like, "Fuck you! I'm going to try to take that title away. And if I win this race, you can't call yourself that." That takes a major dick to do something when you have so much, and you're like saying, "You know what? No. You need to take some." It's sort of like these people who think the rich have too little and the poor have too much. So anyway, Steve and this young redhead, they're getting along really well. Clark is kind of figuring out what he wants to do. For some reason, Clark's his outfit's ripped for some reason in this panel, but it fixes itself right back in the next one. It turns, what happens is Clark, he uses his super breath to cause basically this little mini twister to occur in the office. The papers that the young woman is holding are flying all over the place. For some reason, she's blaming Steve for this. Meanwhile, Clark notices that, hey, this is a cute little redhead, and I'll just blow this, in her direction. I don't know why he did that, unless he wanted to see some upskirt action. And she is wearing a very short skirt. So nevertheless, that's the excuse that Clark does. He goes into that storage room, changes into Superman, he flies out of the building. Then we see that there's a kind of this old-time 1940s type bomb, and it's a nuclear warhead, and it's heading toward Metropolis. We don't know who dropped this or how it got here. It's not concerned. The story doesn't concern itself. But nevertheless, it is a threat at this moment, and Superman has to figure out how to deal with this explosive, because he knows that the mechanisms are set that once it stops being in motion, it will go off. So he doesn't want it to stop completely, because otherwise that would set the bomb off. But at the same time, he kind of has to figure out what type of angles, to kind of fly in to get it away from the city. However, we see a tackily dressed person with long, wavy, kind of Mozart-type hair, or I guess Beethoven hair. And as this person appears in Superman's sight, the bomb starts to fade away, and the missile completely vanishes. And however, Superman is still going forward, because the missile vanished, but he didn't. And then it turns out this wizard, he uses his magic eye to stop Superman's momentum by summoning a net. The guy's very friendly to Superman. He's introducing himself. He says, "Hey, you don't have to panic. My name is Gunther Jacob. I'm on the job. I'm handling this." Superman's wondering, who are you? Are you some type of alien? Because even though Superman's an alien, he might be enforcing those borders, so. He doesn't want to let other aliens on this planet. However, it turns out, no, Gunther is a human being. And the two are talking up in the clouds. And Superman notices that the eye, that extra eye on his forehead, which, you can't ignore that like you can ignore a pimple. It looks a lot like one that Superman and Batman had gotten possession of in an issue of Superman 268. So, sorry. So in an issue, just probably less than 6 issues ago, they're already bringing back this eye. Gunther's surprised by this, because Gunther's telling his backstory, and basically he was just an inventor, and he was a scientist, and he was retired, and he was sort of looking for new ventures to get into. And this is where the writing kind of falls apart here. Basically, he was searching for magic, and he was like using this huge satellite dish to kind of search out for magic, and this way he can measure the properties of magic, because we know magic is very, very reliable and very standardized. And it was going through this process. He was sending out the waves, and apparently the waves caught something, and it was bringing something back, almost like a magnet. So the satellite dish was acting as a magnet. It turned out the eye that Superman had on display in his Fortress of Solitude, that he shared with Batman, because it's important to note, like DC superheroes, like Superman, Fortress of Solitude. You have Batman in the Batcave. I think Green Arrow had his own man cave for a while. They like to brood in silence. So I'm sure Batman was a little disturbed when he noticed all the light in the Fortress of Solitude. Probably telling Superman, hey, when I brood in isolation, I prefer to do it in complete darkness. And so there's sort of like a kind of a Felix and Oscar feel to their brooding. So anyway, this guy has possession of the eye that he says he found. Superman should be saying, no, dude, you stole. But nevertheless, Gunther's the one with the eye. So, 9/10 of the law's possession, so it's his. Superman welcomes Gunther into the superhero club, saying, listen, hey, if you're on our side, I'm going to consider this a good thing. If you ever want to join up with the Justice League, I'll put in a good word for you. Superman, he doesn't need to know people too well. So then we see Gunther here, and we see Gunther doing what I guess some of the watchers in that Captain Marvel number 39 wanted to do. And that is to sort of actively involve themselves in a society to get things done. One of the things that Gunther is doing is that he's bringing material down to the ocean's bottom, so he could build cities to deal with the overpopulation problem that we saw in Green Lantern number 81. Holy crap, I hope to God Stockton Rush wasn't the guy designing these underwater cities that Gunther is building. And so we're going through a whole bunch of things where Gunther is doing these magical acts that are seemingly for the good of mankind. There's actually an issue of the Legion that I'm going to cover at some point, because that was really my favorite 1970s DC title, where they're talking about culture shock. That's kind of similar to this. That was a good issue. So anyway, Gunther, he kind of has this. He now has a new elaborate home base. I guess it's something that appeared at one of the World Fairs. It kind of has a what's his name? The architect, Lloyd something. It kind of has that look to it in terms of a building. I can't think of the architect's name. Very famous one. So anyway, Clark and Perry White, they're kind of talking to each other in the office. I guess they don't meet very much because at this time, Clark was mostly working for the TV station, and his boss was mostly Morgan Edge. So they kind of pushed Perry White out. However, Perry White was still in charge of the newspaper division. So, but nevertheless, the two would meet. The two are talking about Gunther. Perry White's mentioning that Gunther has basically been pushing Superman off the headlines. Perry White actually pretty wisely kind of sizes up Gunther, saying Gunther is someone who might not be trusted because he got this power as basically winning the lottery. So this is sort of a lottery win for Gunther, and people who tend to get tremendous power like that very accidentally, they don't really think through the ramifications. So this is kind of interesting ideas here. He mentioned Superman. He said Superman had to live his entire life with his powers, so he may have a better perspective on how to use them and the dangers of using them. Clark's probably thinking, hey, this is a good guy for some advice. Clark is bringing up the secret identity thing, and he's bringing up the idea that Gunther might be setting himself up by letting himself be so well known that he'll never have a moment's peace. A lot of the things that ended up being in Wonder Woman 84 with the villain there, something Lord, I kind of see in Gunther here. So anyway, there's some breaking news. Jimmy Olsen grabs both Perry and Clark by the hand, okay, and he's pulling them to apparently this newscast. There's a breaking newscast, and what they discovered is that when Gunther uses his power, there's some type of weird fallout or discharge from it, and it's kind of like this green goo. So, and it's described as kind of glue-like. And so, while Gunther's magical feats are impressive and sometimes they're needed, at the same time, nevertheless, they're creating this bad fallout. Kind of similar to like nuclear energy, where the nuclear waste does become a problem at some point, even though they're generating tremendous amounts of power. Perry Clark is reminding his reporters that they're reporters and they need to go out and cover this story. However, Clark is like saying, no, this is not a job for Clark Kent, it's a job for Superman. And he undresses in the elevator. This is before cameras. And again, he runs into that cute redhead and he knocks over her papers again. So, yeah. So there might be some passive like aggression toward attractive young women who aren't into Clark, saying, yeah, you're not into Clark, take that. So anyway, it turns out that it's called the Star Ferry. Yeah, this is definitely based on the Staten Island Ferry. And you can see the ferry's dealing with the fallout because there's this kind of green goo. Superman's there, he's going to help. However, he's covered in this goo right now. And it's really difficult for Superman to kind of maneuver because he still has his powers, but he's kind of slowed down by this glue. And because this glue has magical properties and Superman has no defense against magic, he's being affected by this. So that was one of the problems with the Superman character. Where, I mean, they had to sort of take away his powers to make him a little more relatable and give him a little more challenges. But then he ended up with goofy stuff like this. So anyway, Superman, he's dealing with it. We can see here how unforgiving the DC universe is. After these people are being saved, there's one person who suggests that because Superman is covered up in this green stuff, he's washed up. So, Superman, he gets no credit for saving these people, and he's immediately crossed off as a washed up superhero at this point. So again, the DC universe is very unforgiving. Superman, he's going to have a word with Gunther about this. Gunther is sort of holding court with the public. So if you have a wish, just like with Wonder Woman 84, if you have a wish, he'll try to grant it to you. However, some of the requests are not worthy of his time. One person he just wants Gunther to take care of a noisy neighbor. Gunther Gunther is like, fuck you if you think that problem is worthy enough of my attention. So he's making clear he's not going to deal with any of these mundane things. Superman comes in. He's covered in green goo. Gunther says that he smells awful. So we got to take, for example, he's covered in shit, magic shit. And Superman's still making his case. He's still covered up, although he does look like one of the Greek philosophers in this panel. And Superman's making the case. Listen, until we can figure out what to do with this fallout, I'm going to officially request that you stop doing your magic. Gunther's like, hell no. One, I don't know if this is for me. And even if it is for me, what I have to do is so important that, me worrying about a little green crap isn't going to do anything. However, Superman's making the case that this fallout is a big problem. And that he's giving Gunther an ultimatum. Stop. Gunther is like, no. We're not equals at this point. I'm your superior. And he immediately attacks Superman. And then he kind of gloats Superman. He melts off the green goo that Superman couldn't take off. So that was Gunther's way of saying, listen, I just did something that you couldn't do. I did it easily. You're not giving me orders. And we see Superman, he's free of the goo, but nevertheless, he's still, he might be a little outmatched with Gunther here. Because every time he gives Gunther something, Gunther gives it back plus more. Superman, however, is a bit more experienced. So Superman can aim his eyes with the heat vision better than Gunther can aim his magic eye. The two are fighting. The people who are waiting for their request, they decide to leave. And then there's a whole bunch of this gluey green fallout. So if Superman had trouble getting that stuff off of him, these other people don't want it. Although it should be added that maybe the magic goo won't affect humans as much as it does Superman. Same way the two are fighting. He still doesn't want to hurt Gunther because he doesn't see Gunther as a villain. He sees him just as kind of a delusional guy. Gunther's like, listen, I got plans. I got branding to take care of. I got whole PRs, commercials. I have all that stuff set up. I'm not going to let you stop me. So he's going to chase Superman down as a threat. Gunther, he magically makes one of those animal traps, those inhuman animal traps, and he's sicking it on Superman. Superman realizes the danger because this is magic, so the stuff might actually hurt him. Then they fly into the atmosphere. This is where things get a little cool for me. I have to admit, I kind of enjoyed this little space race. They're kind of chasing each other. They're on the surface of the sun here. And Gunther, he's talking back to Superman, saying that his grand plans of uplifting the human race won't be stopped by some meddling alien. So Gunther is full on, delusional here. The two are chasing each other throughout space. Superman's barely able to keep out of his grasp here. Superman's concerned that at the speeds they're moving, at some point, it's going to start affecting them in a negative way, and he's going to start breaking up. However, two are chasing each other, and Superman decides to make a sharp 170 move here. Gunther is keeping up with Superman because his magic is so good that he's basically Superman's equal at this point. However, Superman does a quick little move and he grabs Gunther from behind and he suddenly stops his momentum. And by stopping the momentum, it pulled out the third eye on the forehead, the magic eye, and the eye is not on Gunther anymore. It's flying through space. Now, obviously, it's explained here why Gunther hasn't basically been blown up or imploded into a million pieces. It turns out some residual magic that Gunther absorbed is still helping him in this space environment. Also, Superman is using his super cape just in case the magic starts wearing off. So eventually, they fly and they end up home, back on Earth. Gunther is going through some amnesia. Apparently, the eye had some influence on him. So while the eye wasn't totally in control, it was largely in control of Gunther. So I think it was the eye's delusions that might have been affecting Gunther's mental health. Superman, he has to kind of take Gunther's word for it, but he apparently believes him. And we're told there's an epilogue to this story. Gunther is a huge success. He's a magician. He's sort of like Doug Henning. This is 2 years before Doug Henning's first TV special. But he's kind of doing the thing, the rabbit and the hats. Clark Kent is on stage. He's reporting this special as it's going on. Apparently this is a new special. Man pulls, rabbit out of hat. Clark Kent and Perry White, they're talking. Clark's kind of impressed with those tricks. Perry isn't so much. But Perry White says that he used to be a magician, and that one of his tricks was that he can saw a person in half. Clark says that, I don't really want you to do that on me, but I know a guy in the sports department that you can do this to, and I'd really love to see that. So that's kind of how the story ends. The next issue is Protectors of Earth, Inc. I bought that issue, but I remember we were vacationing in Ireland when I bought that issue. And so I think they're probably they were a few months behind. So yeah, this is the end of the first story. There's a second story. Should add that overall the art was okay. Vince kind of stole a little bit of Craig Swan's charm, but not too much. Vince did worse jobs. Okay, there is a second story, and it's called The Private Life of Clark Kent. So this is one of the stories that kind of emphasizes Clark more than Superman. I guess it's kind of humanized Clark more. Basically, he clowns a bunch of blind kids. So this is more like Super Dick's story. Okay, so Clark is at his desk at the news station. He's looking through a couple of memos. One of the memos says that he has to do a charity event for blind kids. The other memo says he has to go to the DMV to get his license renewed. Mind you, this guy never drove a car, but nevertheless, he viewed getting the license renewed as more important. So he goes to the DMV. He knows that he has to fudge the test because he can read obviously the chart perfectly, but he has to have an excuse to have his glasses. So he'll sort of mess up enough to justify needing to wear glasses. I guess this is to really kind of, double down on that whole, glasses is my disguise. However, it turns out there's a problem with Clark's vision, and he's having a really bad headache. And these were probably the headaches that Kurt Swan got dealing with his editor, Mort Weisinger. And Mort Weisinger will come up in little later in this story. But this guy was the editor of Superman Comics when Kurt Swan was the artist. And Mort Weisinger was a notorious a-hole. And he particularly treated Kurt Swan badly. And Kurt Swan son talked about how his dad would come home with headaches after dealing with Mort. I'll talk about Mort a little later. So anyway, Clark is having some trouble seeing. He can only see in shadows. Now he can't see anything at all, so his sight is gone completely. He still has to do the test. Now he does what he needs to do in the test because just prior to his eyesight fading, he did take a quick look at the eye chart, and he did memorize it. So he's doing this test by memorization, not by what he can actually see. So he's going to try to bluff his way through the test. He's successful. He's going to try to bluff his way out of the DMV also. Because at this point he can't see anything. Although his other super senses are working, he runs into a young woman here. He kind of misses her, but it turns out that he can hear her heartbeat. It's kind of like how Daredevil can do it. So there was kind of something he missed. He passes his license. He passes his test for his driver's license, but he's calling for a cab, which on one hand makes sense considering his eyesight, but it also shows that he doesn't drive. Why is this so important to him? So he goes into a cab. He's still blind, but he's trying to bluff his way in. The cab driver's noticing something weird with Clark. Clark tells the cab driver to take him home, which is 344 Clinton Street. So anyway, he's heading home, and he runs into a neighbor, a very attractive woman. You're kind of like one of those Jill St. John, Dana Delaney types. And he actually calls her by the correct name. Now, the thing that was going on with Clark was that Clark knew that she had an identical twin, and he would kind of switch the names, just kind of throw people off that he's kind of a klutz and not really paying much attention to what's going around him. And this way he can kind of cover up being Superman. But because he recognizes this particular person's unique heartbeat, he calls her by the right name. She's surprised by this. She's saying, "You usually call me by my sister's name." And Clark is like, I just guess it was a good guess. And turns out they go into the elevator. Clark correctly allows the lady to go first, but in doing so, he presses all the buttons. And again, this way, because his eyesight is completely gone, he's not fidgeting around trying to figure out which is the third button. This way, they'll stop at all the floors and he'll know which one's the third. So he's there. He leaves the attractive young woman. He's still kind of concerned with his eyesight, though, because on one hand he can't go to a regular doctor as Clark, because the doctor would kind of figure out, hey, you're probably Superman based on your physiology. And at the same time, if he goes in as Superman, the doctor's going to be like, what the hell can I do for you? You're Superman. So he has to figure out what to do with this. Now, as he's entering the apartment, he throws his hat, because for some reason in 1973 he's still wearing a fedora. And he lays his hat on a statue that he calls Maury. And this is a statue of Mort Weinsinger. Now, I told you that Kurt Swan really hated this guy. And when Mort Weinsinger was no longer an employee at DC, Kurt can kind of do these little things that he felt would kind of like twinkle Mort Weinsinger's head a little. So in Clark's apartment, he has a bust of Mort Weisswinger, which kind of looks like a gravestone. So this is probably Kurt's way of saying, hey, I wish you were dead. And also he's laying his hat on it. So he's kind of treating this figure of Mort very disrespectfully. Mort Weisinger was the guy who mentored Jim Starlin. Not Jim Starlin, Jim Shooter. So when you hear stories about how tough and how tyrannical Jim Shooter could be, he learned all of that from Mort Weisinger. I'm not pronouncing his name correctly. So anyway, we see that. So they're kind of telling on themselves here, at least Kurt is. Clark, he's kind of figuring out what to do with the blindness issue. And he's thinking that it might have had something to do with the benefit that he was supposed to be throwing for blind kids that he completely forgot. So I think they're going for this kind of like, it was a psychological thing. You know, his subconscious was trying to tell him, hey, remember that benefit for the blind kids? You need to do it. And Clark was so invested in getting that license that he didn't need that he completely forgot about it. So they're going through that whole thing of like, oh, you know, this is your subconscious telling you this. Clark figures this out. His eyesight's fine now. But the thing is, it's like he's late for that benefit for blind kids. And there's two interesting things going on here for the rest of this panel. One, this is a weird attempt at a Zoom call in 1973. As Superman, for some reason, is, and he is Superman because he's not wearing the glasses. The glasses are on top of his head, not on him, so he can do Superman stuff. It's when he puts down the glasses that he's Clark. And we see he calls the station. He has a picture of the host of this event. I'm not sure this TV station rigged their TVs to see Clark back here. So anyway, the host is saying, Superman, you know, why didn't you call to like cancel? The kids would be disappointed. But Superman's telling him, no. You know, this is not, you know, darkest before the dawn yet. We still can make this work. So they tell the blind kids to line up in a particular order. And because they're blind, they all have to be kind of shuffled into this line like little children. I mean, they are little children, but they're more like 10, 12. They're not like, you know, 3, 4. So anyway, Superman's watching this. He's kind of enjoying this little power trip. He told his host, hey, line these blind kids up, and they're doing it. So he's kind of power tripping here, and he pulls a switch, and the kids disappear. Now, normally this should be a problem, to say the least, but nevertheless, Superman says, no, everything's fine. This is part of my plan. And this is where some of the clowning comes in. Superman had transported the kids to the Justice League America satellite, because that was also another conflict that I had forgotten to mention, was that Superman had like, you know, satellite duty or monitoring duty that night. So the thing was, what he did was, since he's trapped in the Justice League of America satellite, he transported the kids to that satellite, which is fine. But the thing is that he basically put the kids in this anti-gravity chamber where they're kind of floating around in this space. Now, according to this drawing, these kids are having a ball here. I cannot imagine this being a good idea for blind kids. One, these kids are going to be crashing into themselves. They're going to be crashing into the walls. They're going to have all types of injuries. They're going to be all bruised. They're going to be crying like crazy. And this would just be a torture. In addition, they can't see. So they have no idea what direction they're going into. I mean, this would be fun if it were something that was a little more controlled. But this is free fall. And at the same time, Superman and Clark, he's sort of half dressed as Clark Kent, meaning that he has the Superman outfit underneath, but he has his shirt opened and he has his glasses up, and he's like, hey, because these kids are blind, I don't have to get into my Superman outfit. So that's sort of like kind of rubbing it into these blind kids. So yeah, he's being a dick here. And we're told here that every Saturday on ABC, the Super Friends are on. And I love the Super Friends. I noticed there were limitations. I noticed no one ever got punched, or the villains weren't really villains, but nevertheless, I love that show around this time. So that's it. Well, no, there's the letters page. Okay, so I'm going to go through Metropolitan mailbag. When I'm in this condition, I don't pronounce words well. They're talking about issue number 269, The Secret of the Eighth Superman. The cover to that is really good. It's a really good cover. The story was kind of so-so. It was similar to this. And first writer is saying, listen, the story was weird. However, it's been better than most of the other crap that Bates and Magnan have been able to come up with. And he's saying, listen, these guys are good writers, but they don't really pick good villains. And he also complains that, for the first time, you had a story where Superman loses his powers and he doesn't whine. So there's a little passive aggressiveness in this first letter, and the editors noticed that too from their reaction. The second one is also a little sarcastic, and it's kind of just saying, for what it's worth, it was a decent book. It was actually, the letter is by Keith Giffen, who was the artist. He recently passed away. He was a great artist for DC. So, he's being he's being very critical of the plot, saying that you guys are kind of hacks, even though he would in a few years work with those hacks. Here's another letter that's saying that there's been an improvement in the title, that he was a Batman fan, and he's been reading Superman, and the stories have been okay. And they're kind of being sarcastic. And there's the last letter. It's from a 12-year-old girl. She says she has an above IQ, and she says that her mom and her older sister think that she's gonna outgrow reading Superman. She's saying, no, I'm not. I love Superman. I love Batman. I'm never gonna stop reading them. And the 12-year-old girl who praises these guys, they're gonna say nice things about her, saying that, hey, we're happy with providing you with great stories, and don't forget to watch the Super Friends on Saturday. Okay, so that's it. And that is my review of Superman, issue number 237, and I hope to have more reviews up soon. Bye.